Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some r/EntitledPeople for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading the post, giving you my opinions at the end, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Medieval Mousy. How did blocking that hydrant work out for you? My house backs up on a public park with sports fields, and is 4 houses from the park entrance. The entrance to the park is a sidewalk that cuts between 2 houses, and there's no parking lot, so street parking only. There's a fire hydrant in front of my house. It is clearly marked, bright yellow, curb painted, and an orange flag sticking out of the top. Despite this, people visiting the park for various sports ball activities routinely miss it and park in front of it. 3 weeks ago, club baseball started. For whatever reason, baseball parents tend to be more observant than other sports ball parents, and generally leave a decent gap. Week 1. I was heading out with the dog when I noticed a distinctive electric truck attempting to wedge into the gap. Doggo and I waited for him to finish and told him about the hydrant. He told us to fuck off. Week 2. We're coming back from our walk and noticed that not only is he blocking the hydrant again, but he has a ticket. Later, my husband sees him tear the ticket up and throw it on the ground. He then flipped our house off before he drove away. Week 3. I once again watch him attempting to park in his special spot, roll my eyes and think some uncharitable thoughts. A few hours later, there's screaming from the front yard. Y'all, the city booted him in front of the hydrant and gave him another ticket for parking in front of the hydrant. I wonder what week 4 will bring. So, just in general, don't park in front of a fire hydrant because not only can the fire department break your windows to better feed the hose to where they need it, but you can't go after them for the damages. In fact, actually, in a lot of circumstances, they can go after you for the lost time and resources they had to spend to break your windows to feed the hose through. So in general, don't block a fire hydrant. It's a really stupid thing to do, incredibly selfish, makes you look to be the asshole, and it comes with the risk of your windows being broken. So to the first responders that might be in the comments section, I've always wondered this. Do you enjoy it when you get to break a car's windows that park in front of a fire hydrant? Like, I would. Also, for OP's sake, you should definitely do what you can to put up some kind of security system or keep an eye on it, because the guy that drives the truck definitely thinks you're responsible for this. So please be careful. Pineapple Ford, my entitled and abusive scamming brother. So I've recently come to realize my brother loves to scam family and does not like it when he gets caught. A petty example would be in 2020, when restaurants were starting to reopen in the UK. I, then 26, was going out and my brother, then 28, asked me to bring back a Five Guys meal costing £20. He promised to pay me back. I obliged and gave him the meal once I returned home. He didn't have the money right then, but promised he would pay it back soon. Around 2 days later, around 11 p.m. in the evening, he approached me in the living room, asking for a massage whilst he watched anime, something he'd regularly request, saying his back was aching badly due to work as a physiotherapist. This time, I said no. I said I'm not going to do a favor like that for him until he paid me back the money he owed me. He immediately got defensive and aggressive, shouting stuff like, "You're seriously not going to do it?" hurling insults, and when I insisted, "I won't do anything until he pays me," he shouts, "You should have reminded me." I point out, it shouldn't be on me to have to remind you. He stormed off immediately. To this day, he still hasn't paid me. I cut him off the following year. Although the above example was rather petty, I bring this up because of something my dad told me a couple of weeks ago. It turned out my dad and brother had some deal where my dad would handle his phone bill and my brother would give him the money each month. Apparently, my dad realized he'd forgotten about this for months. He approached my brother and asked him if he could pay back the around £200 he owed him. Keep in mind my brother earns over $40,000 a year and lives with my parents rent-free, so money is no issue. Apparently, his response was to throw a fit, shouting at my dad and then sending him £2,000 instead, despite my dad's protests. I told my dad that he was using an abuse tactic by overpaying him in an attempt to make my dad feel guilty and put him in the wrong, when my dad's request was more than reasonable. I also have no doubt my brother didn't just forget to pay my dad either. No doubt he was trying to see how long he could do this for. Edit, I haven't spoken to him in 4 years. Cut him off completely after he screamed at me for never talking to him and then trying to out me as trans. I moved out in 2021. Okay, look, I'm an only child, and the closest thing I have is a step-sibling, but never in 100 years would I give my stepbrother a massage. Is that normal? Among siblings? The massage thing? Like, my entire reality of what siblings find to be acceptable was recently shattered when a set of twins was doing sensual Latin dancing together. And a majority, if not all of the twins in my comment sections were like, yeah, that checks out. So, I don't know, and I'm questioning this as a matter of, is this normal? Because I don't know anymore. Now, massage aside, OP's brother seems very good at playing the incompetent card in order to get a lot of things they want without any cost to them but with cost to others. And it very much seems that they've become accustomed to getting their way, and at any pushback or resistance they throw a temper tantrum in hopes of further manipulating or continuing the incompetence abuse. That's just the vibe that I get though. Shane Lizard 123. Entitled Landlord forged my husband's signature on a contract. Posting mainly to vent before I lose my marbles completely. For a while now, we've been having a dispute concerning several things wrong with our place, and he either refuses to do anything, or says he'll do something and then is too lazy or greedy to follow through. Last January, a new dispute began. Nearly annually, we've had a maintenance guy come over to perform maintenance on the heating unit. This was a major nuisance to us because without prior warning, there would be a guy at our door calling my husband, and either him or me had to drop whatever we were doing and come home so that maintenance can be done. Later we found out this was because the company the maintenance guy works for would call the landlord to make an appointment, and the landlord would just pick the first possible option instead of coordinating the date with us. But I digress. The real trouble started when we got the bill for the maintenance. In our country, the landlord and tenant have to have agreements on who pays for what. Our landlord didn't talk to us about this, didn't mention anything or whatever. He just gave the maintenance company our info and they sent us the bill. This didn't sit right with me at all, but my husband didn't want any trouble with anyone, so he paid the bill, which wasn't small. Unfortunately, due to difficult personal circumstances, this happened thrice in total. The third time was last January. My husband paid the bill again, but I decided enough is enough. I started messaging the landlord asking to pay us back for all of the bills. I spoke to a lawyer. All in all, she said it's unlawful that he has no agreements with us and still makes us pay the bill. In the meantime, the landlord came to my husband's workplace during hours to talk. In other words, he came to rant and yell at my husband. In his unhinged ranting and yelling, which my brilliant husband recorded, the landlord said that if a lawyer says so, then he'll pay us back. Ask and you shall receive, Mr. Landlord. I contacted the lawyer again. She sent him a demand letter and gave him a week to pay us back. Did he pay back? Of course not. After weeks of back and forth over email and me calling him out on lies and inconsistencies, and at this point demanding payment, last week he tells me that he has no obligation to pay us back because my husband signed a contract with the aforementioned maintenance company. He also said we can ask them to send us that contract. Husband and I talked about this and came to the conclusion that it's unlikely, as neither of us remembers any contract, let alone have a copy. The next day, my husband calls the company to ask for the contract. Long story short, they told him they don't have any contracts with us personally. They only have a contract with the landlord, which obligates them to perform maintenance on heating units in all of his properties. He should have given us a subcontract that he'd have to make himself, which means the company wouldn't have it anyways. I sent the landlord an email telling him that they don't have any contracts with us and once again demanding payment. This was Friday last week. This past Monday, the landlord answered my email. It briefly said the maintenance contract attached. Weird. I opened the attachment. Oh, I see a contract. Alright. First thing I see is the maintenance company logo. Mind you, a few days earlier, that same company told my husband they don't have any contracts with him. Second thing I see is the opening paragraph of the contract being addressed directly to my husband. I scrolled down to the last page and I thought, nah, that's not how husband's name writes. There was a written date and a signature. The handwriting was obviously not my husband's, and the signature looked to me to be similar to his, but not his. I thought it looked very awkward. It didn't have the same flow my husband's handwriting has, if that makes sense. At the time, I wasn't 100% sure though. When my husband got home from work, I showed him the contract. He immediately said, that's not his signature. He grabbed some other documents he signed before to compare. He wrote down his signature on a blank piece of paper to show me how he signs. Clear as day. The signature was forged. Then we looked closer at the contract. We could see that the opening paragraph that addresses my husband personally was in a slightly different font than the rest. Then it also occurred to us that this contract only applies for one particular year, 2023. Okay, so if this contract is only valid in 2023, and when signed by the customer, the company is obligated to perform maintenance within that same year, then why did no one perform any maintenance on our heating unit in 2023? Spoiler, because the contract is fake, that's why. We were dumbstruck, furious, and frankly tired of this bullshit. We started Googling what to do in the situation. Most consistent answer we found was to file an official police report. The police will investigate and take necessary measures, so we called the police. We have an appointment tomorrow. I'm going to bed now. This turned out way longer than I expected, but it feels good to get it out. If you read this far, thank you. If anyone's interested in an update, let me know. Shane Lizard out. Edit to add, I have more insane stories with this landlord I'm willing to share if anyone's interested. I'll be doing my best to keep an eye on this user to see if they post an update to this specific story and any other crazy landlord stories they have, because you definitely have my full attention. And also, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're disputing with your landlord, 100% do everything within your power to keep as clean of a paper trail as you possibly can, because you never know when something might end up backfiring and end up in the court system, or end up going to police, or you need the records to kind of just shove back into their face. Because the landlord forging documents is already bad enough, and he's probably going to find himself with a fine or prison time or both. But now, adding on a paper trail of extensive back and forth, of him saying X, Y, and Z and you saying A, B, C, and them not matching up, and this contract magically appearing midway through the argument that is very clearly fabricated and forged, and on top of that, it not even properly addressing what's going on with it being 2023 and there was no service in 2023, and on top of that, just everything else that's a discrepancy within it, including the different fonts, the husband's handwriting not matching, all that stuff with the paper trail and the recorded video of the landlord yelling at OP's husband, yeah, that paper trail is going to be rock fucking solid, and there's not going to be a lot that he's going to be able to do. So yeah, make sure you're doing your due diligence and maintaining a paper trail. Anything that has the potential to become a legal matter, whether it's housing, automotive, HR, workplace situations, anything. It's always good to maintain a paper trail and at least at minimum, save any email communications. I actually have a really incredibly embarrassing story from one of my exes where they did not know and could not comprehend the fact that on your Gmail page, when you receive more than 50 emails, those emails aren't gone, and you have a next page button. So what they would do when they would try to find an old email that was no longer on page 1 is they would delete all of the emails that they had on that first page. It's only partially related, but it is something that has bugged me for a long time. And I just think it's too funny not to share because it does nicely fit into this context here. Mycologist Falls 2332. It happened over 2 decades ago, but I'm still angry about it. As the title says, this happened quite a few years ago, when I, 30 female, was a kid under 10 years old. But the entitlement still stings. My parents were in the middle of a nasty divorce. My dad had moved a several hours drive away and was now living with the other party, cause of divorce, named the solicitor's papers, aka my stepmother. Even though I was only a kid, I was semi-aware of what was really going on. It wasn't the first time my dad had moved out because of another woman. But it was the first time the word divorce had ever been mentioned. In the past, he had always come home after a few weeks, full of apologies. So when my stepmother first met me and loudly declared, "Call me Mum," I was immediately in her bad books by saying, "Oh, thank you." But her entitlement only got worse. While Dad was in the process of moving in with my stepmother and sorting custody of me with Mum and solicitors, he would sometimes take me out on day trips, but stepmother always came too. And I became her little project. I wasn't the prettiest kid, but Mum had always said I should enjoy being a kid and not worry about looks for now. In contrast, stepmother's kids, one older than me, one younger, both wore makeup and dressed like they were going to a nightclub. And as stepmother's little project, I had to look like I was going clubbing too. My clothes would be removed as soon as she saw me and replaced with crop tops and miniskirts. She'd sit me down and force my hair into plaits with hair gel. And my original clothes would always conveniently go missing when it was home time. But my mom couldn't play that game with my new trashy clothes. As if a single hair clip I had been forced to wear went missing, then Dad would be calling up on stepmother's behalf and talking about solicitors and police for theft of property. A custody arrangement was eventually worked out as me living full-time with Mom, staying with Dad for the school holidays. And that first, and last, week was rough on me. In all fairness, my dad did try to keep me entertained, but I wasn't used to living with other children. I was an only child. That plus sleeping in a strange place after never being away from my mom for my whole life equals an uncomfortable situation. After a few days, I confessed privately to my dad that I missed Mom. Now, I can see how that would hurt his feelings, but I wasn't asking to go home. I was actually angling to use his mobile to call her. I had used the stepmother's landline the day before, but she had hovered, listening, the whole time, and it just felt awkward. Dad looked upset, but told me to go and eat some lunch, and off I went. And here's where stepmother's entitled behavior exploded. Sitting next to my stepsister, I suddenly had a plate slapped down in front of me by my stepmother. There! I was confused, but said thank you and started to eat. Throughout the meal, she started making snide comments in my direction while talking to her daughter. Things like, "Ah, well done, sweetheart. You'll never disappoint me, unlike someone I know." I was a very timid kid, so I don't know where I got the burst of confidence to say something, but I said, "Is something wrong?" And stepmother snapped back, "You know what, OP? Your father is very important to me, and you've really hurt his feelings." I tried to explain, but she snatched my plate and stalked out of the room. I followed her, still hungry, and tried to take my plate back, but she just unleashed on me. Standing in the hallway with this almost a stranger screaming in my face is something I'm never going to forget. I was apparently an ungrateful brat, and she washed her hands of me. I burst into tears and completely shrank into myself as she just kept screaming. A little reminder, I was a child under 10 years old and she was over 30. My only crime was missing my mother. I honestly think that she should have just been the adult here and had a bit of empathy. How entitled do you have to be to think that it's okay to go crazy at a sobbing kid? So yeah, not something I'm likely to forget. End result. I got taken home that day. Several hours driving with Dad sat in total bone-crushing silence. It did damage our relationship, unfortunately. While stepmother was squawking the house down, I vividly remember seeing him, through my waterfall of tears, standing at the top of the stairs, watching us, and saying nothing. I have no idea what he said to my mom to explain why I was home 2 days early, but I never spoke to her about it. Today is actually the first time I've spoken about it, other than to my husband when we first met and were swapping awful family stories. Fortunately, the only 2 occasions I've seen my stepmother in the 2 decades since has been at family gatherings where we've happily ignored each other. Edit, just correcting some spelling mistakes and saying, wow, and thank you guys so much for the outpouring of love. It really helped me to see things clearly. Up until now, I suppose I was gaslighting myself into thinking I somehow deserved her shouting at me like she did. I just wanted to add a detail, post-blow-up. The custody arrangement changed after that day. I never stayed at or visited stepmother's house again. Instead, it was agreed that Dad would pick me up from school every other Friday, and we would stay with his parents until Sunday afternoon when he'd drop me back with Mom. And honestly, it was always awkward from there, mostly because I was resentful that he didn't jump in and defend me against stepmother. I still don't know why he didn't, as he had always, and still does if he's getting sentimental, said that if anyone spoke to me like that or ever hurt me, he'd beat them up. See where my gaslighting comes from? He always said he'd be on my side, so the fact that he wasn't must mean I really deserved it, etc., etc. Also, my dad and stepmother weren't married at the time of the entitlement explosion. They got married a few months later, on holiday abroad. I was invited, but my invitation arrived only a week before they were due to leave, and it was half-hearted at that. Dad blamed the solicitors for not delivering the message quickly enough. Even though they were divorced by then, the situation was still very hostile and messages were passed via solicitors for about a year post-divorce. Mum was very keen to keep things official for a while, as Dad tended to get overly and loudly offended at everything. One time he dropped me off with Mum, they started arguing, and her new boyfriend got involved. Then the following week a solicitor's letter appeared claiming their party had been injured by the harassment. Mum wasn't keen on me attending their wedding, too many horror stories of kids getting abducted by a parent during or following a divorce. So I said, no thank you, and didn't go. I'd have looked at a place anyway. Full disclosure though, I do still love my dad. We get on well when we chat via text occasionally, but we don't see each other much. I just don't like the majority of his choices, stepmother being a fat one, literally. Dad always used to gloat about how sexy she was to my mom, how he had traded up, about how her stomach was flat and her belly button pierced, whereas my skinny mom still had a saggy belly from having me. Stepmother, of course, reveled in his compliments. I always remember her swinging her red hair around in a really exaggerated way whenever he said how gorgeous she was. Tables have turned though. Over 2 decades later, my mom looks exactly the same as she did back then, except for the gray hair. But stepmother is now rather big, and her red hair is now really red. Clearly out of a box. Evil laugh. The 2 occasions in 2 decades that I've seen stepmother went like this. The first was a family party for grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. In front of everyone, she exclaimed, "OP!" and kissed my cheeks like she was thrilled to see me, but then ignored me when everyone stopped looking. My grandparents are very proud people, and clearly didn't tell extended relatives that their son had got divorced and remarried. For the whole day, people kept saying to me, "Oh, you're blank's daughter. Your mom looks different. Her red hair looks interesting." And I had great fun repeating the phrase, "That's definitely not my mom. Dad left her for that one." Never found out if dad or stepmother heard. I avoided them throughout and left early. The second time was my wedding. Stepmother was absolutely not invited. It was just meant to be a tiny ceremony, parents only. But Dad called a few days before and pleaded, "Just for the ceremony, not the reception. Don't worry, you won't know she's there." For some background, my mother-in-law had already kinda taken over, and our parents' only wedding suddenly included a lot of her relatives. So I just shrugged, thinking, whatever, nothing's really how I wanted it anyway, so why not? A lot to unpack there. I might do a few posts on my mother-in-law's entitlement. True to his word, Dad and stepmother didn't interact with anyone and left immediately after, although stepmother couldn't resist a tiny flash of entitlement by bringing her own camera. Note, my mom didn't attend the wedding after hearing that my dad was invited. Also, she was very ill at the time, so she obviously didn't want Dad to see her that way. But we visited her after the reception and I gave her my bouquet, which was nice. So, that's my trauma dump update. Once I started typing, I just couldn't stop, and such lovely responses. I'll definitely post again. I honestly wonder what kind of childhood OP's step-siblings had, because the way the mother acts, it just makes me feel like she felt that she was entitled to have a third daughter exactly how she wanted it, and when she couldn't quite make her conform like the Play-Doh she hoped she would be, instead she went for the route of using verbal abuse, and who knows, perhaps even physical abuse down the line, to see if she could finally get the Play-Doh to mold in the way that she had hoped. Only of course to be severely disappointed by the lack of moldability that OP had when she was 10 years old. This is a great example of a step-parent trying to involve their stepchild into their life and their methods, rather than the step-parent involving themselves in the child's life or the child's way of living. And that's not even beginning to get started on the father's bullshit behavior of just allowing this kind of shit to happen. I mean, he chose his new wife over his daughter. There's no sugarcoating that. He saw his new wife berating his daughter, and instead of intervening and being there for his child, he sided with his new wife. And that permanently stained the relationship for the rest of the daughter's life. OP will always see her father as the man who stood there watching from the staircase. And that's a choice he'll just have to deal with. And I'm sure that he has dealt with for the last 20 years. Not to mention, there's just so much shit that has happened in this story that I'm sure that any child that has been a victim of a messy divorce probably, unfortunately, heavily sympathize with. Hell, probably have had some variation of this happening to you as well. Things like the clothing stuff and dealing with that headache, or from one step-parent essentially permanently soiling your relationship with your actual biological parent. In the end, my biggest takeaway is that the father got exactly what he ordered. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.